When you're having an uncomfortable moment and you feel anger or irritation or impatience rise up, where does it live in your body? Do your shoulders get tight? Perhaps you feel a weight on your chest, maybe knots in your stomach. Clearly, all these sensations might feel unpleasant, but there is a way to alleviate them. Welcome to Your Time to Come Alive. My name is Valerie Hope. I am your host. I'm so excited that every week I have an opportunity to connect with people who not only help us become more conscious, connected to ourselves and others, but also out of everything that we learn are now more able to create something. Today's special guest will help us alleviate some of that crazy tension that comes up at times when we're feeling, when we feel tense or feel irritated. So I'm really excited to have wonderful guest, Deepa Pulipati. Now, Deepa and we have not known each other very long, Deepa, but I feel like we've been separated at birth. Well, maybe not birth, because I'm significantly older than you, but maybe not significantly, but you and I met in November of 2019 when we attended the Berkeley reunion. We had the wonderful reunion conference, and I think we just sat down next to each other at an event, perhaps I think shared during exercises or something, and just kindred spirits. I think right away felt that your energy and your positivity was just amazing. And what really sealed the deal for me that said, okay, I need to invite Deepa to be on Time to Come Alive, was that you had the same positivity and enthusiasm and excitement when talking about how you mediate conflict, because you're a conflict mediator. And I've never seen someone express such joy and passion for something that so many of us avoid and recoil from. So welcome to Time to Come Alive, Deepa.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for having me.
What else should we know about you before we get into how you love conflict?
I do. Others' conflict, not mine. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm originally from India. I came to the United States back in 1998. I got married. My husband at that time was working here, and he's still working here now, the same husband.
Be
so
sure.
I came here. Right. And I came here, and I was kind of wondering, I just finished my graduation in India, my undergrad, and I was kind of wondering, what do I want to do? Tech was booming in the Bay Area. We were living in San Jose at that time, and everybody was in the tech field, and I never had any interest in tech or any of that. Mental health and law always fascinated me. I just don't know. And I decided to get into my master's program at Cal State East Bay in marriage and family therapy. And then post that, I got this great intro into drug dependency court just to do some voluntary work. And that's how I sort of fell into mediation. I had no idea what mediation was. I just like literally, I'm from India, okay? Like back in the day, we never used to like have divorces and stuff. So I was like, what is this world? People come to court to fight over their children? Like what's happening? I loved it. Don't ask me.
Look, I really am just fascinated that you love to see people fight. No, I'm purposely twisting your words, but I know that you don't love to see people fight, but first of all, who better to like help mediate than somebody that loves getting in there? So say more. Yes.
So what ended up happening was that I think what really pushed me into doing what I love to do was these two people who took me into the program. It was a coveted like internship program. As our second master's year's program, we all had to get an internship. And mind you, I was very new to this country. I did not have the kind of resources that all my other cohorts had. So I was just like, I somehow fell into this. And then the drug court coordinator loved me because I was doing voluntary work. And she's a phenomenal woman still in my life. I don't get to see her as often. She said, let's just go to family court and we'll go there. And these two women gave me a chance. Mind you, I was 23, 24, and I was the only student. I was the only intern who was a second year master's program student. The rest, five of them were all PhD and PsyD students.
Mm.
And after the first, like when I met everybody the first day, and I'm like, what, like, all of you guys are PhD and PsyD. And then I ran to Billy's office. Billy's the one who took me in. She goes, what are you doing? She's like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm like, everybody is PhD PsyD. I'm like second year master's program. I'm from India. I don't know anything about the system. And then she said, there's something that I see. And she actually said, you are a diamond in the rough.
Ooh. That's a great
And
compliment, by the way. Wow. What did she
I,
see? What did she say
I,
that she saw in you?
she said like she saw like a spark. She saw like something that sort of connects me to people, something where I'm comfortable. Like I really want to help people. Like I have a good energy. And mind you, I hadn't even come into my own. I didn't know what I was getting into, right? It's just that whatever innate personality character that she saw, she felt like it would be a right fit, or at least that this would be a good opportunity for me to grow and to learn. And she is one of my most, she's Gandalf. I call her Gandalf if you know Lord of the Rings. so that's how I got into it. And her confidence in my ability to do something here really set me into that place. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It really opened up and said, you know what? I'm not going to disappoint her, and I'm going to sit into it. And it just opened up to learning about the process.
That's phenomenal. First of all, everybody needs to have a Gandalf in their life. You're right. Because
Absolutely.
it does, to have someone reflect back, and this is what I heard you say, that this individual or these individuals really helped you reflect something that was already innate in you. But sometimes we take that part of us for granted because it's always been there, or because we are not always conscious in the way in which we use it or how effective it is. But for
Yeah.
someone to be able to mirror that back to you and say, this is a gift, let's find a way to channel it. Phenomenal. So find a Gandalf, everybody, if you don't already have one. But
Exactly.
it doesn't have to look like Gandalf, I imagine. It doesn't have to like long beard and flowy stuff. But find someone that knows your gift and can tell you and direct you in ways to use it. Okay, so you obviously had a gift for connecting with people. She saw a spark in how you were interested in supporting and helping them. What exactly, when you first noticed that mediation was the area that required you to, put that spark to work, tell us about your first experience in mediation. What was that like?
Well, it was first of all, it was a great intern program. We all learned a few things. One was we learned to sit with each and every mediator in Alameda County Family Court Services and sort of learn and understand their styles. Like each of them had their own different style of conflict resolution, right? And then we got to see like different people doing it differently, right? And then we were able to take the lead with the mediator sitting in the office and sort of come into our own style of like how we wanted to do this, how we wanted to engage people. And in the state of California, everybody who does conflict resolution or mediation within the court systems, you have to have a mental health background. Like there's no way around it. They want, because we're talking to parents and children and we're looking at child development in regards to how it impacts within conflict resolution and how to keep families together even though they're separating or divorcing. They said, okay, we need somebody with a mental health background. So we were already engaging some of those tools, but we were also learning how to sort of look at integrating conflict resolution tools and therapy tools, right? And that's when I just started sort of getting into what is my style, what is it that I like to do. And Valerie, one of the consistent things that came up with this was I really like to listen to people's stories of how they came together, what happened. People are like, well, here they're trying to separate. Why are trying to get to know our story? It really tells me about the person, right? And it
Ah,
really tells me about how did these two people falling in love is again not a concept known to me like in the American way. I've read it in books and all, but two people who fall in love, right, and get married or don't get married, end up having kids, and now they're so far apart, like so far apart that they hate each other, that they're fighting in court. It was just like fascinating. And every story, every first one of my experiences was like that. I was like, wow, like what is happening here? And that sort of like got my spark going. And all my first mediations, coming back to your original, was it was really about understanding like what's really happening. How can I help these people here? What is it that I can do differently here to get them to a middle ground, to get them to a point? And a lot of times you can't.
Mm. A lot of times you can't get into middle ground.
Nope. A
Wow.
lot of times they go to court. They go to court for the judge to make a decision, right? So all of my first experiences was like really about sort of understanding like what's my place here? Like why am I doing this? Why am I enjoying this so much? Um, and one of them I remember very clearly. It was interviewing a teenager, 13 or 12-year-old. And mind you, I just had my nieces and nephews. I've never interviewed a teenager professionally. I've had conversations with kids. Billy was in the room with me, and I was just supposed to observe her. I used to go to the Pleasanton office to spend a day with her to see her style because I love her, right? So I would just go to hang out with her, and she was like, okay, I have an interview of a child, and we do confidentiality and all of that. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to observe and take notes because that was our understanding. And after the introductions, we made the kid feel comfortable and all of that, you know. And then Billy looked at me and she goes, Deepa, take over.
Like, huh? Here?
uh,
Oh, okay. And then what?
I just jumped in. Like of course, my first thought was, crap, I don't want this kid to feel like I don't know what the heck I'm doing because she's already nervous. She's here talking about her parents' conflict. So my first thought was, I'm not going to worry about how I'm going to come across because I knew Billy had my back. Like she would know if I missed something, right? I was just like, okay, just put aside your own nervousness and let's just focus on how we can make the kid feel comfortable and safe and really have a difficult conversation about two people that she loves that are fighting like crazy.
Mm.
Right? So I sort of switched and just got into it and just said, you know what? I'm just going to have a conversation with the kid, like about everything else. How's your life? How's your day? What happens in mom's house? What happens in dad's house? Um, who does what? And then we just flowed and we went there and then we got a ton of information. At the end, Billy jumped in where she felt like there was something else she wanted to know and needed to know. And then after she left, I was like, I was like, what was that? And she was like, you know, you knew what you were doing. I knew you got it. So that was I will never ever forget that feeling or
Wow.
the confidence that she had in me. But it went okay. We did a report and we sent to the court. So, but I'm like, that's how I got into it.
That was your first experience. Wow. I love that story. And I think actually a good Gandalf knows when it's great to release the reins and say, okay, here you go. I felt like saying reins was better than saying like the steering wheel just because of the time.
Right, exactly.
The
Totally
reference.
made sense. I got you. I
Reference
got
line.
it.
There are a few things that you mentioned I think are important to unpack for people. One is that notion that mediation. I love two things that you said. First, you talked about understanding how two people came together and the love story that led to that. That is very different than your cultural background. So, for those who don't know or don't understand how the culture context made a difference there, can you just briefly explain that?
Sure. So I come from a very traditional culture. I'm assuming most of your viewers know India and India's traditional culture. And this was back in the day, right? This was like almost 23 years ago. And I had an arranged marriage. My parents had an arranged marriage. A lot of people that I knew in my community at that time had an arranged marriage. So I met my husband a few times and he was already here. And then he came back to the United States. We were engaged for a year. And mind you, at that time, cell phones and all of that was just not readily available. So we would write letters to each other and we would talk over the phone once every couple of weeks. And then I came to this country. And then, of course, we had a lot of common friends from India who had arranged marriages too, right? So that's the culture that I came from. And that's this whole sense that you sort of you get to know people within the marriage after you get married and you try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And there's compromise, there's building of that relationship. There's good, bad, ugly. There's everything in there. It's not roses, right? So then I come to this mediation, I fall into court where you know, I've always read, like back in India, I've read like Milton Boone and so many other books where they talk about romance, right? And I'm like, oh my God, these people fall in love. It's so cool. It's exciting. And of course, a lot of my other friends in India fell in love too, but somehow I thought this was much different. And I'm like, they're here and they're fighting. Like, what the heck happened? So that was for me just mind blowing, that I thought somehow you would fight. Of course, you'd argue, you'd have like disagreements, right? But I would think people who sort of got to know each other before they got married, they would know their values, they would know they have things in common, they would talk about religion, they would talk about so many things.
Why would you think that, Deepa? If it's romance and love, it's all about the chemistry. Of course you don't talk about values. I'm kidding. You're clearly sarcasm. Now that does happen. What I want to know though is, what did you learn in the process? And this is not about what process of getting your marriage mate is the most appropriate or the most effective, but I love that there's a distinction here, that what brings people together doesn't necessarily keep them together, and that your investigative work in identifying what was it that brought them together could also serve to have them in a probably loving, compassionate way separate from each other. So talk to us a little bit about that. What did you learn? What did you see? And how did that inform how people separated with dignity?
That's a great question. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always was curious about their story, because I was looking for connections that they'd made in the past that I could probably bring to attention, rather than the hurt and the anger and the negativity that they were used to talk about their children. And when we do mediation, my client is the client that is not in the room. My client is the child. The parents are not my clients. The court is not my client, right? My client is the child that is not in the room, right? So my entire focus is on trying to get this kid to have a better experience, and how can I help these parents? And a way to help these parents, when I did that investigative work, is why I was so curious, is that how do I bring these people back to that common understanding, that common goal that brought them together, right? They don't have to stay together, right? They're unhappy with each other, absolutely. Find your way. But where is this anger and this deep hate? You know, that's what I saw in many families, not all families. Some of the greatest families I've seen in court that have come together, but I saw this like deep hatred. And then I realized, Valerie, that some people had never made a connection.
What do you
mean? They just sort of fell in lust, and they thought that was love and that was attraction. And beyond that, once that wore off, they had nothing in common. In fact, they did not like each other in those ways, right? And then they end up having kids, right? See, I mean, and then all of these conversations come about after that. And so for me, whenever people ask me, how can you have an arranged marriage? I said, well, look, I understand, like it's hard for some people to comprehend that, but the thing is, it's the same, like you guys are falling in love. Once that roses and all are gone off, and you know, it's reality. It's you're still getting to know each other in the first couple of years of your marriage, for people who haven't tried to get to know each other beforehand, right? And so it's pretty much in that way, it's the same. Like my husband and I are trying to get to know each other. There are things that we hate about each other. There are things that we like about each other. There are things that we're willing to compromise, not willing to compromise. So taking all that into consideration, I kept trying to bring back, learning that story and bring it back to the current conflict of helping them see, look, all of that is, I understand that, I empathize with that. I'm not your therapist here to make you feel better about your feelings. For that, you need to go to therapy. But how do we utilize that connection to have a conversation about how you guys can be civil to each other so you can create a parenting plan for your children?
Ooh, that's so good. Love the notion, because I don't think I've ever seen it that way. Not that I've experienced mediation before. I love the notion that the child is your client. Like you're really thinking about the future of that child and how he or she feels when they're in the household with the parent. Did they come up with an agreement that will serve their long-term best interest? I think that's phenomenal. You also said something early on about not seeing, because of the prevalence of arranged marriages in your culture, that you hadn't really seen something like mediation take place. So who are the families, or what leads people to have to go that route? that they can't solve it on their own, then they need to either engage a mediator or even take it to the courts. What did you notice are some of the criteria that led people to that path?
I think part of the thing that I saw mostly in families was the fact that they some families did try. They would go to their faith-based, like, if they were part of the church group, then they would go talk to a minister, if they're, or whoever it is, their temple or wherever it is, they would try that. They would try it through grandparents and other uncles and aunts. If they had like a supported extended family system. I've seen some families try that, but some families just did not have any of that. And they felt like coming to court was a power move, right? Like they would, if they filed within the court, then it would just become more, they would have more power and control, or they would scare the other person, right? And some families just did not have a choice because they had a person on the other side who was extremely, unreasonable. Like if you take this pencil, Valerie, and this is something I taught in all my orientation classes. What's the color of this pencil?
Yellow.
No, Valerie, look closely. It could be gold or mustard or.
For sophisticated colors, yes. I like to go with gold, please.
So what I'm talking about is that you take something that's very basic, which is very factual, right? This is this pencil, like it's a fact. You can't dispute a fact, but people choose not to see it. And they choose to see something else because they want the fight. They're in it for something else. So those are the kind of people that come to court because they felt like they had no choice. And I'm glad that there was a court system available for the citizens of the county. I'm glad that there was a service provided because in my culture, you just did all of that without going to court because arranged marriages are about two families getting together. So extended family is always part of our life. So you go to your aunts and uncles, they all get into it trying to figure out what's going on. That's one way of usually solving it. I'm talking about more traditional ways. Now India has changed, like 20 years later, it's evolved, it's getting better. But back in the day, that's what it was. So for me, that was the difference. Here, they felt like they did not have a support system and they felt like they did not have a choice. And then they came to court.
Got it. Deepa, what's a successful mediation for you?
Oh boy, I have so many, like some of the best parents I've met in court, honestly. Successful mediation for me is where two parents put aside all their hurt and anger and frustration and disappointment about each other and say, okay, we did that to each other in our relationship, but that's not what we're talking about. We are focused on how can we make our child's life better and how can we reduce the conflict on an ongoing basis to make our child's life better. And they come up with a plan that works for their family. Not that's about a power move, not about a tit for tat, not that if you give me this, I'm going to get that. Like if you give me more time, I'm going to give you less money or vice versa. It had none of that. The focus entirely was our kid is like 5 or our kid is 3 or our kid is 15. How can we make it better for our child?
Wow.
And they created their own parenting plans that works for their family. And parents are the people who know best. I don't know best about their child. I know best about my child. Well, not most days. So if you ask him, like some days she doesn't know what she's doing.
Like, let's talk to the child first.
Oh, he'll tell you that. That's what I told them. I said, look, this is one of the consistent things I told all the parents in court. I said, I can tell you like how to raise your kid and your kid will turn out to be an Indian kid.
They will turn into an Indian kid.
They would get a laugh out of it because humor was great in these sessions to reduce the emotion, right? And then, but I said to them, you have the power to do something here right now to impact your family rather than allowing a stranger, a judge that doesn't know anything about you guys to read the paperwork, to listen to you guys for 15 minutes and then make a decision that'll impact your family, right? Yeah. So I had a really good, I could say I had a pretty good success mediation rate. Like some of my parents, definitely about 30% of my parents went to court because of various other reasons. And a lot of them came in with a good intentions wanting to try, but a successful mediation is get a plan in place and move on. Get out of the court system. Don't litigate. use your financial resources for your own family. Go on a vacation. I would tell them, why are you spending the money here, right? Go on a vacation.
Such wisdom, Deepa. Why would you spend your money in the court system rather than in taking care of your family and doing something fun? Even if they weren't doing it together, I could see that investing, where is the time, energy, and money being invested? What a great question. What a great question.
Exactly.
What,
Yeah.
when did you know that that mediation was not going to be effective? What are some of the telltale signs or criteria that you know, bad news, this is not going to go? The judge is going to
When
have to rule this one.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways I would know that a mediation was not successful, Valerie. One of them was that when parents are sort of set in their in their mind, this is what I want. Nobody can push me around it. Nobody can make me think differently about this. Nobody can change my mind about this. I mean, nobody can give me information to change my mind, right? So mediation is about providing different tools and solutions for them, or they themselves providing tools and solutions for themselves so they could compromise, right? But some parents were pretty much like, I'm talking, these families are families that don't have severe mental health issues or drug or alcohol addiction or child abuse or any other different types of conflict. You know, they didn't have any of these. These are families that were just pretty just fighting families, right?
Just
So for
fighting
me,
families. That's all.
so for me, it was like, oh man, they're literally set in their ways. Like I can't, any kind of perspective that I can get them to think about or provide, they're just not willing to change their mind on that. And it's okay. Sometimes it's okay for that parent to be that way and to not shift their position because it's somehow very important for them. And court always had a way of, it was reality testing. Court was reality testing because people, when they've never appeared in front of a judge, they don't know what it means, right? They think a lot of times that they're going to get what they want because they, in their mind, are reasonable. They are the reasonable parent. They're providing all the reasonable points, and the judge is going to see how reasonable they are. But they don't realize that the judge is looking at two people, right? Two competing people providing good information, plus the law, plus what the law says, right? And sometimes it's a good reality testing for parents who are set in stone about what they want is because, oh, the judge doesn't see it that way. Oh, I'm not going to get what I want. Oh, it's about the child. And I'm not saying that we as mediators or judges, we're all great, we get everything right. We don't. Family court is hard work. Like we don't know how we're going to get it. That's why I tell parents, you guys get it yourselves. You know better, right?
Oh, that's good. That is so good. Let's shift gears a little bit. You mentioned the main client for you is the child. Okay.
Right.
So let's
Right.
talk about children and conflict. What is the experience of a child? And I can tell you from my own personal experience, my parents didn't go through mediation, but they were married for, I want to say 24 some odd years before they got divorced. But man, was there conflict. Ever since I could remember as a child, there was conflict. Great people, they grew up together, right? So if you think about the origin story, there was love, there was friendship, there was all of that, and then things shifted once they started having family and some of the other pressures I imagined as adults. But oh, I used to hate it. I do remember, I know my parents love when I talk about but this is my experience. This is my story, mom and dad. I remember I was like maybe 12 or something, and they just had this huge argument. And that was the first time I heard the word divorce come up between the two of them. And this was in the 80s, so divorce was not commonplace. There was something to be really ashamed and embarrassed about, and it was a lot of pain. So I remember crying in my room because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's divorce, what? And I don't even remember much of what happened, but I had a conversation with my dad, so I think he just appeased me. He's like, okay, no, we're not going to get a divorce. So I kept my family together. That's what I like to think. But it was not a good move. It was a power move, okay. It was definitely a power move. It was not that enlightened. You know, at 12, I was just really reacting to my own safety and my own perspective. But I remember when they finally got divorced, after I'd already finished college, my younger brothers were already on their way. And my mom gave, she called and told me, hey, your dad and I have been talking and we decided to get a divorce. I was like, finally! Oh my gosh, you guys took forever. Finally, we have some peace in this family. It was from 12 to I think I was 23 or so by the time that finally got resolved. Night and day. So I'm really curious about the experience of the child that you prioritize in those moments. What are they needing? What are you noticing works for them, and what
Yeah.
doesn't?
Yeah. So when you sort of think about like the traditional way of you sort of talking about divorce, right? That's what it was, and that's still what is in a lot of American families too. This saying that for our children's sake, we want to keep the marriage together, right? But what research has showed us in the last 20 years around how it impacts children is that parents who have high conflict amongst each other in the family and decide to stay together, that actually is not the right move because it has an adverse impact on the children living within the household, as opposed to parents saying, oh my God, this is just getting too much. Let's, for our sake and our children's sake, have an amicable divorce and figure out how we want to raise these kids in two separate households. That thinking, research has showed, has a better impact on the overall mental health and growth of children, right? So that's what I used to tell parents, because a lot of them came in 20 years married, 18 years married, and we stayed in, but they had fights. Like, I'm not talking every couple has arguments and fights, and that's normal, but we are talking beyond normal, right? We are talking almost every day or every other day. The conflict is high, the tension is high, there's no connection, right? So I've interviewed, I don't know, hundreds of children in family court from ages 5 to 18 as part of the process, because the judge said, we want to get more information from this child, so I need you to interview the child and write back a report, right? And consistently, these are the few things that sort of kids told me what I think was important for them, within their parents' fight. And some of these things where I want my parents to understand that I love both of them and I cannot take sides.
Yeah.
Right? But by doing all of these subtle things that their parents were doing, it made the child feel like he or she or they were taking sides, right? The other consistent thing that I saw is kids were so protective of their parents, Valerie. It broke my heart so many times. They were like, they wanted to take care of mom and dad while they were fighting, or two moms or two dads, whatever the family consisted of, right? And they were like, I want to take care of them, and I don't want to say anything or do anything in here that somehow impacts them or makes them feel bad, right? The third thing was, is it my fault? Like, is this happening because of me? Or this is happening because of me? That I must have done something that my parents are fighting, because a lot of fighting ended up happening on child rearing practices or around kids, and somehow the kids felt like it was their fault, right? So these are literally the consistent things that I saw. And then what I realized children needed was a few things. One was, just because parents think that children don't know what's happening, they're having conversations here or there, kids know everything,
Yep.
see everything.
So true.
They notice everything. And because they don't have the maturity level of a 25, 27, 28-year old, it sits differently with them, what they're noticing and observing about the adult's conflict, right? So know that your children know a lot. So what your children need is, how are you going to engage with them knowing that they know a lot about your conflict without talking badly about the other parent?
Ooh. That's next level adulting right there, Deepa. That is. Yeah.
It's hard, Valerie. It's really hard. It's hard for even families, even couples, together, even in the family, right? But it's really important to, at a very basic level, to tell the child, mom and dad are having a fight, mom and having a fight, dad and having a fight. But guess what? Because we are adults, we are not able to get along about anything. But the one thing that we have in common is our love for you. And that you never have to take sides. You never have to do any of that. And that you can talk to both of us equally. Both of us are equally important for you. It's just such a simple message, Valerie, that if they can consistently give to the child, and not get into this fight when a kid says, oh, mom said this or dad said that. How do you turn that back around and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to talk to them. But you know what? We both know what we're doing. You don't have to worry about this. But when they get that information, they use that to say something bad about each other, or to say, oh yeah, see, this is how your dad is, or this is how your mom is, right? But if they did none of that, and they had a very a very open conversation, honest, yeah, we're fighting, we're having a little bit trouble with whatever it is that we're talking about, but that's normal. We're trying to figure things out. We don't hate each other, we're just disagreeing with each other.
Wow. Who would have thought? Something so simple. But yes, but putting the child in the middle is a terrible feeling. I think I would say that, well, to this day, I'm so glad that my parents healed whatever rift was. They did much better apart than together. My dad's now remarried. And to this day, I think they've been the model divorced parents. They have been friends. They really knew how to keep us as a priority in the center of their friendship now. And my mom even connects and has conversations with my father's wife, and it's really been fascinating to see how it could work. So I totally get what you mean, and being put in the middle is horrible. But now, after they've realized that how they can join forces and do whatever's best for the family and their children, wow, night and day.
It's not only that, right? It's just, I think that's really amazing what your parents did, because those are ideal parents, whether they're together or whether they're separated. Those are the parents that the kids are looking for. Coming back to your earlier question, like, what do kids need? Kids need parents to figure out a way to put their differences aside and get along with each other. Be civil. You don't have to be the best of friends, but model good communication, model good engagement, model good, okay, I really hate your guts, but I'm going to put it aside for the sake of us having a working relationship. Keep it a business relationship if you want, right? Like, how are we helping our children also understand healthy interpersonal communication and interpersonal relationships, right? My son, this is what he tells me, like last week, couple of weeks ago, my husband and I, had a very interesting argument, which we usually try not to do, but these things happen all the time, right? So, and then later that afternoon, we were all having lunch together, or I cooked and all of that. And then I gave my husband food, and then we talked about something else. And he looked at me and he goes, this is what I'm talking about. I said, what do you mean? He said, in the morning, you guys had a pretty strong, conversation. And by afternoon, you guys are normalized it. You're talking to each other. There's no disrespect, and you've sorted it out, and you're not holding on to that and treating each other badly. He said, this is resiliency in couples. I'm like,
how old is your son?
He'll be 14 this July.
Your son is 13 and nearly 14 years old, and he's talking about resiliency in a couple. Man, can't wait for him to become a therapist. Yes. That's great, because he's watching all the moves. That's really fascinating.
But what he told me was, he said, and this is, I don't know if this is good or bad, because I said, oh my God, I feel like somehow at some point you'll go to therapy and talk about your parents, and that's okay, but I have to be prepared for that, right?
Or have a podcast and talk about your parents. Either way.
There you go. There you go. So I said, he was like, no, I think you're just sort of teaching part of the culture, part of the cultural impact of this is that if there's something good to stay together, then you're doing this, you're sort of, what's the word? You're trying to make it work, rather than all the other families that he felt like he saw, several families, whether in movies, depiction in movies or wherever. Oh, this is really hard, I'm going to give up, right? Yeah. So he's like, if there's something there, then you're sort of fighting for it. If there's something important that of value there is, then you're not giving up, and you're not letting your ego come into play. You're just like, okay, we'll try and see if we can make this work. Now, eventually if it'll work or not is a whole separate issue, right? There's so many other things that come into play. But at least he felt like we were showing him how to develop and build resilience, which I didn't realize. I was thinking more like I'm sending him to therapy. Oh God.
I'm already saving up for that. I
Right,
think
exactly.
but it's such a, I think, an interesting thing to look at. One is the fact that nowadays so many families are not able to get the kind of space and time, couples imagine, space and time that they would typically in the middle of a pandemic when everyone is asked to stay home as much as possible. So there's likely, turn up the tension, turn up the heat a little bit in the family dynamic. And not only that, but yeah, for a child to see the explosion in the morning and then the simmering in the afternoon, it might be a little confusing. So talk to me a little bit about how does one manage the conflicts? How do you have these productive conversations? It happened by accident because your child seems to be so woke and conscious. But when you're in a family dynamic that there's a lot of conflict, especially when people are confined to their homes or in a space,
Mhm.
what can people do to diffuse some of that?
So there's the thing is, so one of the things that you also see and realize in therapy is that two people who want to engage and want to reduce a conflict have to be at the same level of engagement, right? One person can't be like fully woke and wanting to have a conversation, and one person can't be like, it's all your fault and it's all this and it's all that, you need to change, you need to improve. So two people have to say in a relationship that we both need to work towards this. We both think at some way or the other we are at fault. We both need to compromise. We both need to fix this. Maybe one person needs to fix this about themselves, and other person needs to fix how they engage, whatever it may be, right? So that's the first level. Like two people, two parents, two couples, do they really want, do they think that there's enough to want to create that continuous engagement? So within the family, when you have conflicts, there's no like one way, if today this worked, tomorrow it's not going to work, right? So if you have parents like who are fully like enraged and for screaming and crying, the way to do that is, let's just get all the emotions down to a point where we are feeling okay on the inside. So we don't have to have a conversation right now. We don't need to have a screaming fit, but we don't need to do any of those things. What we really need to do is, how do we regulate? Because self-regulation is a critical, important component that we need to cultivate constantly, right? Which we start cultivating at a very young age. So how do we get ourselves to a point where we can actually have a conversation and not yell and scream and throw hurt and hateful stuff at each other, right? So that's first step. Both people have to want to do that,
Good.
right? Both people would be, okay, we both are like high up here, so let's just come down here, right? And then after that, a very simple tool that I myself have used with couples and in therapy and all of that is, a lot of couples feel like they're not being heard. Like literally they're not being heard, right? So one of the ways of doing that is, so you and I are talking, right? So it's kind of like the feedback thing that we do in coaching. So when you say something, Valerie, I first say what you said. I give you the feedback, right? Playback, sorry, not feedback, but playback. And then I respond to what you said.
Yeah.
And then you do the same. It creates a whole another level of conversation. Again, a very simple technique, but what it says is that I'm actually really listening to what you're saying, and then I'm responding. Because most of the times when two people are like arguing or fighting, what's happening is that as the other person is speaking, this person is already thinking what he or she is going to say, as a way of saying, I'm going to show you that you're wrong, and I'm saying this and I'm saying that. We're literally like half the time not even listening to what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
So, and then you see what is important here. What was about this fight or this argument that was important, or we wanted to sort of come across to each other, right? What is it that got you upset? What is it that got you mad in the moment about this conversation? And not pull everything from the 20 years we've been together. You did this in 1945. I'm like, what?
All the stacking that happens. Yes.
Stacking. My husband and I, we have a lot of history. We've been married together for like 23 years, right? And so we really try, and at times it's not easy, but we really try to bring the conversation to what is happening today, right now. I told you this 5 years ago and you still continue to do this. Yeah, no, let's not go there. And then don't bring anybody else into it. Don't bring your mom, don't bring your dad, don't bring your family, don't bring your aunts and uncles, don't bring anybody into it. Don't bring your friends. Don't compare to other couples. See, she does this or he does that. How can you, how come you don't do that? Don't bring anybody else into it. Just talk to each other. And then how are we solving it today? And what is it that we want from this? And a lot of times you'll disagree. See, the really important thing is it's okay to disagree. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about faulting each other. It's just about listening to each other. And it's okay to say, okay, I hear you. That's your perspective. I don't agree with it, but we're going to leave it at that.
I mean, couples need to have like an intense self-regulation practice. I meditate, and I think that helps slow me down. Slows down my reactivity a lot. I wonder, what tools do you give your clients so that they have that moment of reflection, of self-regulation before they engage?
Well, there's part of it is, I think mindfulness is a big part of it, right? See, with anything, Valerie, what's your intention when you want to get into this? Do people even know what their intention is? Like when they want to get into a fight or when they want to get into an argument, when they want something from this, what's your intention? What do you want from this? So that's the first thing I ask couples to sort of engage in. Like, what is it that you want from this? Do you even know what you want, right? That puts things into perspective, that intention of knowing, because if you really, what you really want from this is that you want to tell this person that they've hurt you very badly, or they've said things that they shouldn't have said, and you wish that they stayed on your side, then that means you have to be vulnerable. Then do you have the courage to be vulnerable?
To
Right?
really say what is it that we want, as opposed to using a strategy to get what we want.
Basically.
Get that? I get
So
that.
how do we develop those tools of inner critical, not to be critical of yourself, but just critical thinking, to look at it without feeling supremely angry at the other person, to not look at it saying, I want to do something to you, I want to stick it to you, I'm angry at you. Look at it, what is it about you? What is going on with you first, right? So the tool to develop is, for self-regulation, is inner engagement. Like, what is it that I want from this? And in order to do that, you can do journaling, you can go to therapy, you can talk to your friend, you can do so many things, but the focus has to be not about the other person, what you want from the other person. The focus has to be, what is it that I want from me?
It sounds so simple, and you're absolutely right. I think we also live in a society and a culture where introspection is not a habit for so
Yeah,
many of us,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
when there's high, big emotions involved, right? Big
yeah,
emotions,
yeah.
sadness, anger, whatever. That introspection is generally not the first step that we go to. But I can see, yes, in journaling. I'm not a big journaler, but I do like to talk things out. So I've curated a great circle of people. Deepa, I'm putting you on my speed dial, by the way.
Absolutely. And you'll be on mine. Hey, Valerie.
I need to vent right now.
Exactly.
You're right. I think having whatever the style is, whether somebody goes within and journals and really reflects on their own, or if they need someone to help mirror back. But I think you also said something really important, this idea of playing back. So whoever you engage to talk through whatever the challenge is, and I find myself doing this sometimes subconsciously, finding a person that's a great listener, someone that knows to reflect back as opposed to give opinion and ideas or fuel and stoke the fire or the disappointment or the anger. So I think there's other, they're great friends. Sometimes they're wanting to do the best and support, but all they do is add more fire. They don't necessarily help self-regulate.
Yeah.
Being really
No.
mindful
Yeah.
about who we pick and the method that we used, and then also
So,
being able to articulate what it is that we want. Brilliant.
right. And I think, Valerie, I think, provide a very important tool by Brene Brown, which is, how do you cultivate and create your marble jar friends? If you've read her Daring Greatly book, and I facilitate Brene Brown workshops. I'm one of her certified facilitators. I do Daring Greatly and Rising Strong workshops, and also do teen workshops called Bold. So one of the things she says is that, who are our friends? Who are these marble jar friends that we
With
feel
what
like,
friends? Mar?
They're called marble jar, like putting a marble in a jar every time. Yeah, so it's a great tool that she says she uses every time you cultivate that friendship or you create that connection, because it's about trust. Having a friendship is about trust, and who is willing to listen to our story without judgment.
Mm.
So when you talk about, I created this group of friends, you know which friend you want to go to tell the story and what you need in that moment. If you need to vent and if you need to bash this person, then you go to this friend. If you need to like really have this person call you out on your own stuff, then you go to this friend. These are called marble jar friends that you've cultivated and created connections over years that you trust to tell your story.
Why marble jar?
She said that she came up with this like when her daughter was like at a very young age, and she was cultivating these friendships, and every time like you sort of have a friendship, you put it in the jar and you fill up your jar with good friends, or you take it out. That was the concept. So she gave a name to it, but more than anything, the connection is who are your friends, who do you tell your story.
Mm, that's lovely. I'm so fortunate. I feel so blessed that I have a lot of people that I have over the years cultivated these relationships with. And you're right, being able to decide who is a person that's most appropriate for this particular challenge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the last few minutes, Deepa, what else should we know about you and this wonderful gift that you have to love conflict and address conflict? What else would you like to share with us?
So for me, I think conflict resolution, mediation, parenting is like one of my most favorite things to do, because I really, I think I bring it back to the point that I love to see change. As somebody in the mental health field, seeing change within people, changing for the better, working on themselves, getting better in whatever it is that they're doing. I felt like mediation and parenting puts parents on a path of actually creating solutions, things that they can do to make the changes in their families. So actually having a plan in place, right? So that's one of the reasons why I love to do it, because there's so much like progress and growth and movement in it, right? And so that's one thing. And the second is I do Brene Brown workshops. I love her work. And I think it's a great work for couples. So I have like an 8-week work that, couples do it together, and you can do it all on Zoom. So yeah, those are the two of my favorite things right now that I'm doing. And of course, I'm a coach too. So,
Look at that.
oh,
Oh,
two books that I'm reading, which a really good friend gave to me. One is called Tell Me Who You Are, and I'll send you the links for this, Valerie.
perfect.
So this
I'll
is
add them
around
to the show notes.
right. This is around the conversations we're having right now, which is really important about systemic racism in this country. It's important to have these conversations with our kids. And I think one of the ways to do that is these two young women, one is Indian American, one is Asian American. They were 17 or 18 when they wrote this book. They traveled all across America and wrote stories of people from all various backgrounds and cultures, and it's phenomenal. So my
Mm.
kid and I are reading this book and are talking about it. So conversation comes about bias and stereotypes and microaggressions and systemic racism, and what kind of conversations do we want to have, right? So that's one thing. And this one I haven't yet started. It's called American Like Me, America Ferrera. So
Yeah.
these are the two books that I'm reading. So what I would like to really take away for your viewers is read with your kids. Not only just read about what's going right now, and talk to them and see where they're at and what is important as a culture that we want to create right now.
Ooh, conversation. It all starts with conversation.
Yeah.
Deepa, thank you so very much. I will make sure that I take the books, the links, access to your website, and the way people can get a hold of you, and put that in the show notes. So any of you interested in having further conversation with Deepa about all these wonderful topics, I really got so much clarity on what makes a couple states come together. Doesn't necessarily keep them together, but how to still do that with grace, and also in a way that will further the needs of the children that they have. And then ultimately, how to have an empowering conversation by self-regulating first, or connecting with people that could help you do that before engaging in those big emotion conversations, the big high stakes conversations. Great stuff, Deepa. Thank you so much. I'm so taken by your love and commitment for helping people go through some of the most difficult times in their lives. I think, there's so many different types of difficulties, of course, but I know dealing with conflict in any way, shape, or form could be such a challenge for many of us that some of the tools that you provided today and the insights that you provided, I hope will serve those who've been listening and watching. Those of you who are listening and watching, first things first, if you haven't subscribed to Connect to Joy on YouTube, please do so. You'll get a notification anytime there's a new episode. Also, you can go to www.timetocomealive.com, and if you subscribe there, you will get every episode sent to your email inbox. So make sure that you do one of those two things so that you do not miss a single thing, and you also have access to Deepa's contact information from there. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Deepa, once again, thank you for being here and being the light that you are in places where people feel the most darkness.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.